be seated.
Yeah, sorry about that.
No problem. We do have enough for a quorum, though, so that's good news.
My clock just hit 10 o'clock, so I think we'll go ahead and get started if that works for staff. Are you ready to roll, Jeff and Amanda?
I'm ready.
I'm ready. Is Susan here? Just making sure that we have.
She is.
Great.
She is, yeah.
Great. Thanks, Susan.
Does Jeff know his camera cover's on?
Oh, hey, wait a second. What happened here?
Or turn on your camera, maybe.
Maybe you need to flip your keyboard down.
Yes, it was on a different,
There.
it was on a Teams meeting last time, so it switched my camera. I didn't realize that it was blank, so.
So I will call this meeting of the May 4th SWAC to order, and running through a roll call. Jim Cooper, City of Olympia. I saw Jim. He's here. Commissioner Carolina Mejia. I do not see her. Councilmember Joan Cathy.
Present.
I do. Hi, Joan.
Hi.
Council Member Ed Kunkel, City of Lacey.
Present.
Council Member Joseph Richardson, City of Yelm. I don't see him. Council Member Elaine Clam, City of Tenino. I think I did
I
see her.
am here. Yes,
Wonderful. Welcome, Elaine.
thank you.
Council Member Steve Purcell from the town of Bucota. I do not see him. District 1 Rep Greg Schoenbachler. I'm not seeing Greg today. District 2 Representative Richard Moon. There's Richard right there. And representing industry, Delroy. I did see Delroy earlier.
I'm
Delroy.
here.
All right. And representing industry, Chad Sutter. Is Chad here today?
I'm here.
Awesome. Thank you, Chad. And representing business, David Nightingale. I'm not seeing David's name on our list today. And from the Department of Ecology, non-voting, Olivia Caros.
I'm here.
All right, thank you. And that's it. So, do we have any guests today?
Well, I will start with the staff. So
Oh, sorry.
initially,
Thank you, Jeff.
so Amanda Romero is there in that very large room. And it just as a quick thing I want to point out really quickly is we do have a physical site that people can come to. So she is in the conference room there today, and that is anybody that would like to visit this meeting in person can come to the Rainier conference room out at the Tilley Road campus. So it does not appear to be anybody else there besides Amanda this morning. As far as additional staff, I see Art Starry from Public Health and Social Services is here.
Hello.
We're going down here. Kathy Clark.
Hi, everyone.
Let's see. I think I'm scrolling through. Have I missed? Oh, Susan Isham is here. She's going to be presenting today.
Hello.
Public Works as well. I see Patrick Soderberg is on the call.
Good morning.
Am I missing any other county staff? Commissioner Mejia, it looks like she is logging in right now.
Great, good.
And I believe, unless I missed any other county staff, if I did, identify yourself.
And it looks like we have Travis Dutton with the Association of Counties with us. And also John Cox is here. And just looking at the list, Steve Gilmore is here. And I think that's it. Did I miss anybody?
There's a
The specific disposable name.
that was Jeff Harwood from Waste.
Okay, thank you. Yep.
And Nick Harbert's here with Waste Management.
Awesome, thanks, Nick.
And I see Gary Franks from Olympia as well.
Excellent, thank you.
I think-
Anybody else that we might have missed?
Well, of course, one of our speakers today, Paul Jewell, also from,
Yeah, but I was thinking he would get an introduction later.
well, he will.
Yeah.
Looks like you
With
have Dean
that,
from Public Works too.
oh, okay. Thank you. With that, has everybody had a chance to take a look at today's agenda?
I didn't get the agenda.
You didn't get the agenda,
No,
Elaine?
no, I didn't get a notice that there was. I had sent an email to Amanda asking if there was a meeting today and she responded yes, so.
Okay.
But somehow she said I was missed on the list.
I can forward that to you now, Elaine. I apologize for that.
It's okay.
So knowing that Elaine is going to get the agenda in just a moment, I would entertain a motion to approve today's agenda.
Move approval.
Thank you, Jim. Is there a second?
Second, Ed Kunkel Lacy.
Thanks, Ed. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, please say nay. The agenda is approved. And now we need to approve the minutes for the meeting of March 2. Let's take that separately. Is there someone who will make a motion to approve the minutes of March 2?
So moved.
Second.
And that was
Ed
who?
Kunkel.
Oh, thanks, Ed. And do we have a second?
Second from Jim. Oh.
Thanks, Jim. All those in favor of approving the minutes of March 2, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay. We have approved the minutes of March 2. Now let's take a minute to look at the minutes of April 13th. Do we have a motion to approve?
I'll make a motion to approve.
Thank you, Delroy. Do we have a second?
Second.
Thanks, Jim. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, please say nay. We have approved the minutes of April 13th meeting. And Jeff or Amanda, do we have any public comment today?
I don't see anything unless our guest has any comment.
Do our guests have comments today? I think that's a resounding no. Let's move on then to old business. Jeff or Amanda, did we have anything in old business today?
I do
No,
not
no,
believe.
sorry, go ahead.
I'll go ahead, Amanda. I don't know if I have anything else to add.
Yeah, no old business today.
I didn't think so. Thank you. And under new business, we're going to hear about our capital facilities projects. Susan, you're up.
Okay, great. Let me get my video on here. Ta-da. Okay, yeah, whenever you share the slides, Amanda, I'll get going.
All right.
Okay, great. So this first slide, you can see this is everything we're working on right now. You might notice that the pumps have a budget now in there. So we're looking at $2 million for construction, $3 million overall. So that's one of the changes. Yeah, we can go on to the next slide. All right, so this is SCADA. And right now they are putting the control panels together before they put them up. And there is some construction going on, the conduit and panels and things like that. So that is underway. I don't know if there's anything you might want to add, Jeff, with that.
No, it's generally going along relatively in alignment with the schedule. There is a potential future concern maybe on a couple of parts for a couple of the panels that are out a little bit because of supply chain, but at this point in time, it does not appear that it should affect the overall schedule.
Okay, great. All right, so let's move on to the next slide. All right, flare. We've had a few delays due to supply chain issues. This COVID time period has impacted everyone on every level, it appears, and projects are no different. So this has pushed substantial completion out to July of 2022 based on some of the parts we've had to get, like skids and things like that. So otherwise it's trucking along. So let's go on to the next one. Pumps. This is the big one that is alive right now. We are working towards 100% design. We should have those documents in hand by mid-May. And then we hope to be able to get it out on the street to bid by mid-June. Like to start breaking ground in August, but we'll just have to see. And supply chain issues, there might be some maneuvering that needs to happen based on getting the replacement pumps and all that kind of parts of it. I should also mention that pumps are being integrated with SCADA as well. We've had some change orders there so that we can make sure that all the pumps are monitored on the same system. All right, next slide, please. All right, so all the lighting improvements to the work that we needed to do to increase employee safety, those have all been finished, which has been great. We've had some involvement from work staff with that. We have one work staff person who's an electrician, and he's been really great to help with that. Security cameras, we're working on that. And the fencing and access control is going to be part of the work master plan. We didn't think it would be smart to do it now and then have to redo it when we got that project going. All right, so next slide, please. All right, speaking about the master plan, we've got two concepts that have been developed and are being cost estimated right now. If I can use that as a verb. That's kind of where we are. We're looking at what it will actually, if there's a difference between the two different plans. So that's where we are right now. And let's go to the next slide. All right. So the Dropbox upgrades, you probably already know all about this, but we're looking to put a new South County transfer station in, and HDR is working on that. We've got a couple of sites identified. Just trying to get all that work up, and then there'll be some public hearings about the sites. And so this is a little ways out, but it's moving forward. Meantime, the staff conditions at both sites could use some improvement. There are not really break areas. If you've been out there, they're all kind of on top of each other in a little toll house. So Jeff had the really great idea about creating portable break rooms. So we have gotten together with an architect as a consultant, and those are in design right now. We've got one for each site. They're going to be identical. It's just going to be a shelter place, but it'll have heating and some seating and just a place to like eat lunch, and they can still keep an eye on the queuing to see if they need to jump back in. So yeah, that's what's going on right now.
Are there any questions of Susan or comments about our capital facilities? If not, thank you, Susan.
You bet.
That was a quick and easy update. So thank you.
Bye.
Moving on to our post-legislative session update. Paul, thanks for joining us again.
Yeah, good morning, and thanks for having me again. It's always a pleasure to speak with the Thurston County Solid Waste Advisory Committee. Must be one of the largest solid waste advisory committees in Washington, and certainly one of the most active. So it's a pleasure to be with you this morning. I want to take a moment and introduce Travis Dutton, who mentioned that he's sitting in on this meeting in the chat. Travis is a new policy analyst with the Washington State Association of Counties. He joined us a couple of weeks ago. He is a former solid waste manager, actually, from Clark County, and was a member of the Washington Association of County Solid Waste Managers. In fact, he's until a couple of weeks ago was serving as the co-chair for that group for the last year and a half. So they're going to miss him, but their losses are gain. And Travis will be working with me pretty closely as he will work in the natural resources policy arena, and will be taking over a lot of the solid waste policy area work. So you may actually see him at some of these future briefings, or certainly feel free to tap him as a resource if you need any assistance from us at any time. Amanda, do you have my presentation?
Yes, I am sharing it right now. Are you able to see it?
Yep, it looks good. You want to go ahead and move to the first slide, or the second slide, I guess? So what I was asked to do is basically give you kind of a recap of what happened during the legislative session. This first slide here really just talks about the priorities that we went into the legislative session with, and meaning the priorities of the Washington Association of County Solid Waste Managers and the Washington State Association of Counties. The three are listed there. They're pretty self-explanatory. Infrastructure funding has been an issue for quite a while for solid waste. You probably know that the state refuse tax, which is 3.6%, is supposed to be going to the Public Works Assistance account to assist with public works projects, including solid waste projects. But unfortunately, that money has been diverted for many years and is diverted currently to the legacy, to the Education Legacy Trust account as part of the McClary fix that was implemented a couple of years ago by the legislature. It's currently slated to continue that diversion, I think, until 2023 or 2025. I tried to look that up really quickly this morning, but I ran out of time. I'm sorry. But we're hoping to get that diversion stopped, excuse me, and that money made available for solid waste projects moving forward. Obviously, you guys have infrastructure projects that you're working on. So are many other counties and cities across Washington. The demand for solid waste is growing in our state with a growing population, and we need to continue to invest in infrastructure. So I'm sure that will remain as part of our legislative agenda. The second item there is the EPR, or product stewardship policy development that was being worked on last year. There was a very large bill that had to do with product packaging and paper materials. If you're not familiar with EPR, it's a acronym for Extended Producer Responsibility. Essentially, it means that the producers of products take responsibility for the end life. A really good example of that are things that already exist in Washington State, like fluorescent light bulbs, electronics. Another really good example would be the deposit for cans and bottles in Oregon, and how you take those to grocery stores and other places where the manufacturers then collect those. And you actually get some money back for that deposit. So that would be another example of an extended producer responsibility program. So there was a program last year that proposed a new system for recycling in Washington that would have focused on EPR. And then finally, the last mandate, or the last priority that we went into the legislative session was was to resist unfunded mandates. None of us in government like unfunded mandates, but unfortunately, they're all too commonly passed by the legislature, even though the law requires that the legislature provide resources to local governments for new programs, but unfortunately that gets violated quite often. Before we move to the next slide, I'll just quickly go to the end of the story. We failed miserably on all three of these, and I'll go into detail as we move forward. Go ahead to the next slide, please. So these were the two successful bills that passed last year with regard to solid waste. Interestingly enough, it was a very short session, as every other session is. It was only 60 days, but there was a lot of activity around solid waste, kind of remarkable how much activity there was. And solid waste continues to be a focus of the legislature. It has been the last couple of years, and we expect it to continue to be a focus. A lot of it has to do with environmental outcomes, and specifically the state's goals around greenhouse gas emission reduction and dealing with the impacts of climate change and the causes of climate change. And these two bills are exactly within that wheelhouse. Both of them really focus on the reduction of methane emissions from landfills. Methane emissions, of course, are a very potent greenhouse gas. Landfills are notorious for high levels of emissions because of the anaerobic digestion in landfills of biological material or organic material. As organic material actually decomposes in an oxygen-less environment, which is called anaerobic digestion, it will emit methane. Methane is considered a short-lived climate pollutant in that it doesn't last as long as carbon dioxide, but it is far more potent. Estimates are anywhere from 25 to 150 times more potent than CO2. And because it's a short-lived climate pollutant, it actually contributes significantly to the short-term heat impacts or heat retention effects of greenhouse gases. And so it's considered kind of low-hanging fruit by many climate activists and others who are interested in dealing with the impacts of climate change and mitigating climate change. If you can reduce your methane emissions, you can buy more time, so to speak, to deal with the other CO2 emissions that contribute to the 1.5 degree Celsius threshold that most of us are trying to avoid worldwide. So both of these bills were focused squarely on methane emissions. The first one, House Bill 1663, really had to do with installation of landfill gas capture systems. Wasac's official policy or official position on this bill was opposed. And it's not because we don't agree with capturing landfill gas or methane gas. We just had some concerns about the bill itself. This was a highly technical bill. If you had a chance to read it, you really needed to be an engineer or a landfill gas capture system expert to really understand all of the ins and outs of this bill. But essentially, it requires any landfill that has accepted waste after 1992, January 1st of 1992, to go through a series of tests. There are some size qualifications. I think it's up to anything over 450,000 metric tons would qualify. You have to test essentially for methane emissions, quality of the emissions, et cetera. And if the landfill is of a certain size and has a certain amount of emissions, then you're required to install landfill gas capture systems that meet certain requirements. It applies, like I said, to all landfills after January 1st, 1992, whether they're closed or active. And compliance with the bill's requirements is required as of January 1st, after the Department of Ecology finishes rulemaking to implement the bill. We did have several concerns about the bill. First of all, there wasn't real good clarity in the bill as to which landfills that exist in Washington state would be required to comply. We were hoping that there could be some funding or a study included in the bill that would actually identify which landfills specifically would fall under the bill's requirements. Secondly, there was no funding provided in the bill to assist with either upgrade of existing systems or installation of new systems. And then third, we heard from some of our members that they felt like the requirements of the bill would disincentivize any sort of plan or strategy to capture landfill gas and reuse it as RNG, renewable natural gas, for another purpose, whether it's for vehicles or for heating or some other way to reuse that gas. Reusing landfill gas, of course, if you have the right quality and the right quantity, creates an even better environmental outcome than simply capturing it and flaring it. And they felt like this bill really disincentivized folks from trying to make that investment and taking those risks. We were able to get a few amendments to the bill around how the penalties would be used for those who are in non-compliance. And we were able to get some exemptions in the bill for any future landfill mining activity that might occur in landfills. We know that a lot of the older landfills have a lot of metals in them, and some countries in some situations are finding that mining those landfills for those metal materials is actually a better environmental outcome, less harmful on the environment than mining for raw materials and creating virgin products. So at some point in the future, if that's something that we do in the United States or here in Washington state, there are some exemptions built in there. We were not able to get any funding attached to this bill, which was a disappointment, and we were not able to get any study requirements or funding attached to this bill either. That will likely be a priority for us moving forward. The next bill that I want to talk about on this list here is House Bill 1799. This one had to do with organic materials management, and Wasac's official position on this bill was neutral. At first, we had some concerns about the bill because it also didn't include any funding, but we were able to get to neutral on the bill, and I'll explain why. First of all, The bill establishes a statewide goal to reduce landfilling of organic materials by 75% by the year 2030, and that's from the 2015 levels. It also creates a statewide goal of rescuing 20% of edible foods and moving those for human consumption by the year 2025. So we know that about a third of all products that are currently being landfilled today that go across the scales are organic materials. So we're talking about a lot of material that's going to be taken out of the landfilling system and processed another way. By January 1st of 2027, counties must include source-separated organic solid waste collection services at least every other week to all residents and certain sizes of commercial customers in their comprehensive solid waste management plan. The collected materials also have to be managed by composting, anaerobic digestion, or some other method that's listed in the bill. They can't be landfilled. Now, there are some broad exemptions in the bill, including the size of jurisdiction by population, the size of jurisdiction by density, the size of jurisdiction by amount of waste generated. So if you fall under some of those exemptions, then you don't qualify. There's also some exemptions for areas outside of urban growth areas. So unincorporated areas are not included in the requirements. And there are some exemptions related to economic factors, including distance and cost for transporting materials to a facility if one isn't available locally, and also the existing capacity at a organic materials processing facility. There's separate requirements for larger scale businesses in the bill, and local comprehensive plans. This is related to your comprehensive plans under the GMA, must allow for the siting of processing facilities within the jurisdiction. So you cannot say, you can't exempt yourself by saying we're not going to allow these anywhere within the county, within the city, et cetera. Included in the bill, so we really supported, by the way, those exemptions and worked hard to get those built into the bill. And that was one of the reasons why we felt like we could move from opposition to a neutral position. Also in the bill is a pretty important section that talks about a financial study. One of our concerns with many of these proposals around solid waste that have been coming up over the last few years and that have been passed is not only are they creating costs on one side of the ledger book for us, if you choose to, for instance, build a processing facility, additional costs for ratepayers or for programs for collection, et cetera. But they're also reducing our revenues. If you think about what it's going to do to your revenues to take 1/3 out of your waste stream that currently is going across the scales into your landfill, for certain jurisdictions, that can be really significant. The way that our systems are designed today, we have this kind of perverse incentive to landfill because that's where a lot of our revenue comes from. And so we're really, with a lot of these new programs, we're thinking about fundamentally changing the model for and the business model for solid waste management here in Washington in order to achieve better environmental outcomes. And that's a good thing that we support. But we really need to understand the financial implications on our current revenue models. And we're going to have to rethink those a little bit, much in the same way that WashDOT is trying to rethink how they're going to pay for roads, maintenance, and construction, right? Because the statewide goal to reduce greenhouse gas emissions has a great big bullseye on fossil fuels and gasoline, right? And is focused towards electrical vehicles. And so WashDOT's trying to kind of rethink or reinvent how they're going to pay for transportation. We need to, kind of think along the same lines with solid waste. So there's some money and some funding included in this bill, and some study requirements that require the Department of Ecology to work with the counties and the cities and other stakeholders, and hopefully to hire a facilitator or a third party to do a financial analysis on these solid waste proposals that have either been passed or have been proposed in the last couple of years. So we'll be able to look at this. We'll be able to look at the landfill gas capture systems. We'll be able to look at even the EPR program and some of the other stewardship programs, and look at what those proposals, what impacts those proposals will have on our revenue streams and our costs. So what's it going to cost us? They also have to look at the core services model that the Washington Association of County Solid Waste Managers put together a couple of years ago that really creates a blueprint for what we think is a best case scenario, or at least a minimum best case scenario for consistent solid waste management services across the state of Washington to achieve much more uniformity and much more consistent service from county to county, region to region, district to district, and city to city. They have to look at, let's see, those two things. And there's one other thing for whatever reason is escaping me, but we were very pleased, and I think there's over $300,000 available to do that study, and that study will be moving forward shortly. We think that this not only will help us, advocate properly on some of these issues and represent you and others, other members better on some of these issues, but really gives us a blueprint, hopefully. Oh, the third thing is for making recommendations on how we might finance solid waste services in the future. So hopefully will give us a blueprint or some ideas on how we should be changing our systems moving forward. House Bill 1799 also includes a couple of other elements I just want to mention really quickly. There's some broadening of Good Samaritan liability exemptions in the bill for those who donate food for food recovery. It creates the Washington Center for Sustainable Food Management to help coordinate statewide food waste reduction strategies. There's a grant program in there to assist agricultural users to adopt the use of composts within their systems. And when we're talking about organic materials, we're talking about food waste here, which I probably should have mentioned at the very beginning, which can be a little bit controversial because of some of the odors associated with it and some of the other difficulties in making compost out of food waste. And it's a little bit controversial in using an agricultural product. So there's a grant program out there with the Department of Ag to try to incentivize that for agricultural users. Local governments over 25,000 in population are required to adopt an ordinance prioritizing the purchase and use of compost products that are produced locally. That has to be done by January 1st of 2023. And there's some reporting requirements annually to Ecology about how much you divert every year, how much you procure every year, what you're using it for, et cetera. And you have to incorporate into your planning some communication strategies with residents about the value and the benefits of the use of compost. And then finally, there's some truth in labeling changes around product degradability and compostability for consumer products and how producers actually market those. That's a good question, Jim, about the definition of locally. I'm not sure, but I could look that up and get back to you. Next slide, please. This is the list of other bills that had to do with solid waste last year. This is actually a fairly long list for a 60-day session. I can tell you I have a lot of other policy areas in which I work, and the list was not this long. So everything from labeling of biodegradable products to recycling of wind turbine blades. Just to give you an idea, we were in favor of House Bill 1686. We were in favor of 1801 and 1810. We were in favor of 1896. We were in favor of 1932. Which added some new post-consumer content requirements to plastics and packaging. We were in favor of, 2003 and 5697. That was the EPR for product packaging and paper products. And we were also in favor of Senate Bill 5492. So the bills that we didn't like as much passed, and the bills that we liked didn't pass. But we were able to, I think, work within the system pretty well. Next slide, please. These were some of the bills that we opposed. 5717 around composting products. That bill actually created some more strict requirements for local government procurement of food waste produced compost. The same provisions that are in 5717 were originally in 1799. It basically just set these kind of arbitrary requirements for local governments to acquire compost. It didn't really consider whether you needed it or how you would use it. It just said you have to buy it. We were not in favor of that. We were able to get that out of 1799 and replace it with this ordinance that prioritizes the use of compost, especially locally produced compost. The idea behind locally produced compost is so that you're not shipping it in from California or Oregon, which kind of defeats the purpose of trying to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, right? But we didn't want you the proposal was that you would buy back at least 50% of finished product in what you diverted from your waste stream in organic material. And we just didn't feel like that was appropriate. But by prioritizing the use and making sure that you're replacing like landscaping material with compost, that, you know, other landscaping material you would use, or soil amendments and solid waste projects, projects are utilizing compost for filtering stormwater in stormwater socks and things like that, we felt was very appropriate. So the next one we opposed is 5740, which had to do with diverting litter funds, which essentially would have probably cut into the local share of litter control dollars. We have 60% of the roads that we're responsible for as counties in Washington state, and we didn't feel like a diversion of litter control dollars to other purposes was appropriate. And then there were 2 attempted raids on the MOTCA account this year, which we really opposed quite strongly. If you're not familiar with MOTCA, it's the Model Toxics Control Act, and embedded within the MOTCA program is the hazardous substances tax. That's a tax on hazardous materials that come into Washington state. Primarily, the revenue from the hazardous substances tax comes from the sale of gasoline in Washington. And we worked really hard a couple of years ago to get the MOTCA program and the hazardous substances tax kind of reformed back to where we were very comfortable with its uses. We also have a substantial amount of funding that comes from the MOTCA program through the hazardous substances tax called the Local Solid Waste Financial Assistance Program. That funding was back in 2013 was about $28.6 million. It was cut all the way down to $10 million. I think in 2014 or 2000, no, it was in 2013 where it was cut down to $10 million during the Great Recession. And we just finally got that funding restored last year. And then we had 2 proposals to basically take all that money and use it for other purposes, or at least a significant portion of it out of the operations fund, which is where our local solid waste financial assistance money comes from. And so we were very concerned that that money was at risk again. That was Senate Bill 5857. And then there was also a proposal to put that money into transportation funding. We opposed that along with several other stakeholders, and thankfully those bills and the transportation funding proposal did not move forward. Next slide, please. So the final takeaways, we were disappointed that the EPR didn't pass. It would have really fundamentally changed the way that recycling is paid for here in Washington state. It would have saved local programs quite a bit of money, and hopefully would have achieved some better environmental outcomes on a whole host of levels. And we can talk about that in more detail if you're interested. Both 1663 and 1799, no matter how you look at them, are massive unfunded mandates. California is implementing a similar program as 1799, and we've heard from many of our colleagues down there that they're seeing ratepayer increases as high as 71% in order to implement those programs. We know that that sort of ratepayer increase is devastating in solid waste. Solid waste clients tend to be very price sensitive. When prices get too high, we see illegal dumping increase, and we're already seeing that on the rise. And cleaning that up does not achieve the dumping achieves worse environmental outcomes. And then when local governments have to clean it up, it actually costs more. So our priorities are going to be to try to get funding to implement those programs as we move forward. And then finally, infrastructure funding is still an issue. It was not addressed in this legislative session adequately in our minds, and we'll continue to keep that. We'll likely continue to keep that on our agenda. We actually have some meetings in the next couple of months to decide on our next agenda moving forward, but I assume that that will probably stay on there. That's all I have for you today. The last slide, of course, is my contact information, and I'm happy to answer any questions if you have any.
Thanks, Paul. And as always, really informative presentation. Does anybody have any questions of Paul? You can raise your virtual hand or your real hand and we'll try to catch it. Yeah, Delroy.
Yes, you made a comment that unincorporated areas were excluded from the organics collection. And was there any exception to that? Because when I read that, I had the opinion that if you had enough population in a certain mass, it might that might affect the county in that way, or the size of the county. There was a number of issues.
Yeah, that's a very good question, Mr. Cox. Originally, the bill included for unincorporated, actually for the county, it included, well, really just straight across the board, a density requirement for census tracts, which was a very unusual thing to include in a bill like this. Basically, it said, in any area where there was a census tract where the population, I think, was below 75 people per square mile, you didn't have to provide the service. What we're concerned about, of course, is census tracts can include incorporated and unincorporated areas, depending on how they're designed. They're really trying to capture a certain amount of population. And that's for, for really determining kind of similarities between individuals and looking at voting districts and things like that. It's not really intended for this sort of application. We wanted that removed and replaced with just incorporated areas, unincorporated UGAs, and then outside of unincorporated UGAs, knowing that the idea here was to really try to capture the biggest areas of the population. And we know that service models, can more easily be adapted within urban growth areas than they can in rural areas. Unfortunately, we have at least one large county over 100,000 people that is non-GMA planning and doesn't actually designate urban growth areas. And so they left the census tract piece in there to try to deal with that county. I think we need some clarifying language in the next legislative session that really says, okay, this is targeted at that county, and the rest of the counties are, just follow under the, UGA, non-UGA model, so that we can clear that up a little bit. It really is intended for counties like Thurston and others that you would have to apply. You're mandated to apply the service within the urban growth areas, but not outside of the urban growth areas. That's really the intent. I believe so. We just need some clarifying language around that. It's actually pretty astute of you to point that out, sir.
Because one of the questions that led me to that was how the UTC and certified the certificated carriers would deal with that, because I don't think that they specifically addressed densely populated areas. It's covered over their certificated area.
Yeah, it would be a mess. The whole census tract piece, in our opinion, would likely create a patchwork, essentially, of areas where the service had to be provided and not provided. And if it were in court, if the census tract included, a really kind of dense area or a highly populated area outside of an urban growth area or in an urban growth area, and then went kind of into a really rural area, you could have this, really strange and kind of system to try to accommodate that kind of census tract model, and it just doesn't work. So that was something that was on our radar really early. We thought we had solved it, but then it's really Cowlitz County. We can blame Cowlitz County. There's just this anomaly that's out there, and we got to find a way to deal with it. So
I did not know there was a county that wasn't following GMA, but that's interesting. Thank you for that.
Sure.
Richard.
Yes, I just wondered if you could speak specifically to the arguments against 5697 and more broadly to those that were supported and failed. What is the primary opposition to these, or why did they fail? I mean, was there sort of a general trend or technical arguments down in the weeds for most of these bills?
Yeah, so there's a couple of arguments against 5697, and I won't pretend to know all of them. The counties actually came on board fairly early with that bill, and there were some stakeholder discussions throughout the session to try to see if it could gain some traction and overcome some of the objections, but I wasn't directly involved in them. So I'll tell you what I know. You might reach out to Carl Schrader with the Association of Washington Cities, who was leading some of the discussions around 5697 if you want some more information. I know many of you are city representatives, so that should be pretty easy for you to get in touch with him. So there were a couple of objections that I know of. First of all, the haulers were not thrilled. They weren't thrilled for a couple of reasons. First of all, they make some profits off of the commodities that they collect, right? So they collect plastics, they collect aluminum, they collect a few other things. And they really felt like the rug was being pulled out from under them in some ways, in that they wouldn't have the ability to actually collect those commodities and sell those into the secondary market to reduce costs to ratepayers, and felt like that would affect their profitability and their ability to compete. They also felt like there wasn't a lot of clarity on how their existing systems would fit into this new model of EPR. So under the EPR system, manufacturers had to create what are called PROs, or product responsibility organizations, that would then oversee implementation of the system and be responsible for the deliverables or the outcomes. There wasn't a real solid guarantee in the bill that these PROs would contract with the existing infrastructure in place with the hauler community to continue that service model. And I think the haulers wanted some more assurances about that, and the PROs were a little hesitant. And the manufacturers were a little hesitant to say that there was going to be a predetermined outcome, because they felt like it would limit their ability to negotiate a reasonable rate. So that was one issue. Obviously, not a minor issue, a pretty big issue. Another issue, frankly, was that the manufacturers weren't thrilled about taking responsibility for the end use of their products. Right? They like to make shiny products that attract consumers' eyes and, look good on a shelf. And this would really create a lot of incentives to maybe create more responsible packaging, more recyclable packaging, or here's an idea, less packaging, right? And less packaging means less opportunity for marketing and different things like that. You can see why a manufacturer would be like, maybe I don't like this idea, right? And it also put all of the responsibility for paying all of the costs on them. They would actually have to pay local programs like ours, like counties, for collecting of the services, for instance, for your drop-off locations, and the staffing required to do those, and the infrastructure required to manage that material. They'd have to pay you for that, right? They'd have to pay the haulers to collect the material as well. And the manufacturers also really wanted exclusive rights to the commodities that were collected. So they were saying, if we're going to pay all these costs, then we want the exclusive right to buy it back so that we can put it back into the product stream. That may sound like a good idea because you'd have a built ready market, but what we were concerned about is that would actually lower the value of those commodities over time, and not allow us to collect those commodities and just have them available as new raw material for whatever use might pay for it. And that would actually lead to increased rates for ratepayers, and higher profits for manufacturers of those products, rather than a free market where once you recycle plastic into a reusable material, whether it's a bottle manufacturer or a toy manufacturer or whoever might have the ability to buy that from that manufacturer, and that manufacturer could sell it to use the free market, right? I mean, that's what capitalism is all about. We felt like arbitrarily giving them the rights to those commodities would create a worse outcome for consumers at the end of the day. So those are three major issues that I know that they were not able to overcome in that bill. Sometimes when you have major issues like that, bills still pass, but it was only a 60-day session. It's very difficult to get really complex problems like that solved in a 60-day session. We've been talking about it for longer, but this was the first time a bill of this sophistication around this type of program was introduced. So I expect it'll move forward, although the bill's champion, which is Senator Mona Doss, is not running for re-election this year. She's, kind of that large exodus of legislators that we're seeing this year. So it's unknown to me, exactly what we'll see moving forward, but I don't think it'll be dropped.
Thanks.
I know that's complicated.
Great explanation. Thank you, Paul, and great question, Richard. This was a fast and furious 60-day session. They're all crazy, but this one seemed unusually so. Any other questions of Paul before we let him off the hook? And Travis, you're welcome to join us anytime. Anything else, Paul? If not, we are just cruising along today. Jeff, you are up.
Thanks, everybody. It's good to see you.
Thanks,
Nice
Paul.
to see
Appreciate your presentation and information. Okay. All right. Next up, a manager's update. Okay, it's got a few items for you today. First one to talk about is, if you recall, we had talked previously about the waste characterization study that we were having performed for us. HDR is our contractor. So just as a recap, is we're doing a waste characterization study as well as looking at recycling contamination and contamination in organics, which was called for in the solid waste management plan. So we are performing that study, and additionally, this is being mostly funded by the Department of Ecology through a local solid waste financial assistance grant, which Paul was just talking about just a little bit ago. So we actually had our first sampling event last week out here at the Waste and Recovery Center in Lacey. I know Amanda was one of to get a feel for the experience, Amanda assisted with the waste sorting along with Wendy Mifflin's team from HDR, just to see how that goes. So this is the first of 4 that will happen throughout the upcoming year. So I think it went fairly well. I think Amanda had some interesting experiences that you get when you're sorting through just randomly selected garbage, that we take samples from incoming loads that that are sort of selected ahead of time to be representative of the general waste stream that's coming into the facilities. So I don't know if Amanda wants to chip anything in on her experience. I'll give her a quick opportunity here.
Oh yeah, it was a great experience, and we were out there rain or shine. We did some garbage sorting in the rain, but we had tents, and it was really enlightening to see the kinds of things people are throwing away and get a feel for the service needs of our community and what kinds of things they could be recycling more of, or we could be diverting. And so I'm hoping that when we finish the 4th sort in December, we'll have a clearer view of the kinds of things we need to be targeting, the materials we need to be targeting when we're reaching out to specific audiences.
Exactly. And as she mentioned, after the 4 samplings, we'll be aggregating all of this data into the overall picture of what is still being 2 pieces. One, what is still being thrown away, what's still in our waste. As you know, the last waste characterization study we have was done in 2014. So that's been 8 years. So I would expect to see that there's some substantive differences in what the waste stream looked like then to what it looks like now, because of different programs that have been implemented over those years. And as Amanda mentioned, the data that we'll get will help to inform us on decisions either for new programs to go after certain materials, the ones that show up more significantly, as well as in our education and outreach efforts. That particularly relates again to either whether it's new programs or you're targeting. We have food waste as a good example, and other organics that we'll need to do additional work with, as well as the recycling contamination aspect, that's just the other piece of the study, and educating individuals on, don't be putting these items into your recyclables. We all know, for example, plastic bags are usually one of the prime contaminants in recycling. So again, the study will help us to inform our efforts in where we need to focus our energy and our education and outreach dollars into really having the best bang for the buck. So we're really hitting the problem areas. So as I mentioned, the SWIFA grant is funding 75% of this cost. And is there any, I don't know if anybody has any questions about this item. Okay. The next item is just to let you know, so the division, we actually as you know, we maintain the old Hawks Prairie landfill, which was closed at the Waste and Recovery Center. And that was closed back in April of 2000. So the old landfill has been closed for 22 years. So our staff actually operates and maintains the old closed landfill. And we monitor the groundwater out there as per our closure permit, which is required from Washington Administrative Code. So we're responsible for the collection of groundwater samples, which we do with our staff. And we take it to a private analytical lab that does the analysis of that. And then we are required to report quarterly to ecology to show that we're in compliance with our permits and that we're not causing any groundwater contamination. So while we do all the sampling and we have a private lab for the analysis, the reporting has been done for 10 plus years by a private consultant, and the term for that came due. So we recently put out a request for, earlier this year, put out a request for proposals to get a new contractor to perform that analysis and provide those reports. So on March 17th, we actually received 2 proposals from a couple companies to perform this reporting. Well, I'm having a hard time talking today, sorry. So we actually evaluated these proposals, the 2 proposals, and the highest scoring proposer was Landau Associates, who are located here in Olympia. Additionally, besides being the highest scoring based on the criteria that we developed, is just go ahead and mention they were also the least cost as well. So that worked out quite well. Actually, it was at April 19th, the Board of County Commissioners approved that contract. So we have a new contractor performing this work. It's up to a 5-year contract. Basically, it's an annual contract with an option to renew for up to a total of 5 years. So, so we're working with a new contractor with that, and that's we're excited to be working with them. So they're on the case already with the first doing the first quarter's groundwater reporting. Any questions related to that? Easy crowd today. Okay.
Yeah, I actually had something, Jeff.
Sure.
It's a little bit of a tangent, but I know something about the rules of ecology for solid waste, and the one of the things is that after 20 years or so, that you can actually reduce the things that you monitor for a closed landfill, or even modify your closure plan if you're seeing very little impact. And have any of that kind of analysis been done to see if you can actually ramp back what you're doing? Actually, yes, and what you refer to, and that doesn't just apply to groundwater monitoring, but for example, we've been working with Orca. In fact, when we renewed our permit, where we reduced some of our landfill gas monitoring requirements as well. So yes, there are some, and same thing goes with LOT. The wastewater, we're up for renewal, and we'll be looking at changing some of those monitoring requirements as well. For after, like you said, 20 plus years, a lot of times there's constituents that are consistent over 20 plus years of monitoring that they will sometimes allow you to drop certain tests that you would have to do because they've never been an issue. So yes, we have looked at that, and yes, there actually have been changes made. Any other questions? And I should just quickly mention, he wasn't here in the role. Dave Nightingale is here, so as obviously, but I want to make sure that's noted for the record. Thank you. All right, the only other item I have on my update today has to do with the Waste and Recovery Center. So just going to give you an update. We've had some issues with the compactor out here at the transfer station. So give you a little background. So back on March 18th, the compactor here at the work went down for about a week due to a failure of a compression ring. After about a week, they got the part in, got it repaired. It worked okay for a short while, and then the ring failed again. Unfortunately, this time it also damaged the bar that pushes the ram that helps to compact. For a while there, about a week or so, they were able to limp it along at lesser capacity. And then they basically had to stop because they were concerned about creating any additional damage to the compactor. So the compactor was originally scheduled to have repairs performed by SSI, who is the manufacturer of the equipment, on April 11th. However, unfortunately, the unavailability of a subcontractor caused the repair date to slip, and the new repair date is now set for May 16th. So for a little while here, we've been operating without a compactor. So we've been putting out just top load containers
basically exclusively. As you know, with top load containers going out, you do not get the levels of compaction. And so thus every load carries less material than you would want to get. So due to this reduced ability to remove waste, we've actually reached capacity. We had one day 2 weeks ago where we reached capacity. We actually had to shut down the work for a day. That was back on April 16th. And since that time, while the contractor has been challenged to keep up with the waste, they have been successful and they've been keeping up with the volume. So we do know that the SSI will be on site on May 16th. They'll have all the equipment needed to perform that repair. One of the key pieces that's been delaying this repair has been the need for a specialized crane, which is a subcontractor to SSI, to lift it up to perform the work. So, we're moving along here and keeping up with the waste, and just wanted to let you know about the situation. And we hope to have this repaired in about a week and a half. So I don't know if there's any questions related to that.
It looks like Richard does have one.
Muted here. I was just wondering what the increase in your load volume is. I mean, is that twice as much, or roughly what's the increase in your hauling costs for that?
Certainly, that's a good question. I say so. And typically, a top load container could be able to get somewhere between 25 to 28 tons, that range. Or a compacted load would typically be 30 plus tons. So we're losing maybe 4 to 5 tons per load going out, as far as less. So again, you can't remove it as quickly as we would like to utilize it. Additionally, I should mention that Republic, who is our contractor, and of course they subcontract that with Waste Connections, but we under our contract, we pay a higher per ton price for uncompacted loads due to there being less payload. So it's, I believe, $3.10 or $3.11, I forget exactly, per ton more for uncompacted loads per ton. But Republic, because of this extended outage related to this and having to go with uncompacted loads for such a long time, is basically going to be reimbursing the county. So for all this time the compactor has been down, we will only be paying the compacted load price. So it'll actually be, we won't be being penalized for having lighter loads going out. And I see Del, oh, I'm sorry, Richard, do you want to follow up?
Just one follow-up question. Am I wrong, but in the future plans for the War Capital Improvement Project, were there 2 compactors planned for that rather than one, so that you'd have at least a backup, not a backup really, but have increased capacity with a second?
And I think that's a good question. At the very least, the plan would have capacity, or just put in the design a location so that you could have 2 compactors. Now, whether that compactor will be put in right at the beginning of that or not is still up in the air, but absolutely you would want to definitely have the space to add one should you need one, because looking at future volumes, out 10, 20 years, you want to definitely plan for that capacity. Delroy, yeah, I see you have your hand raised.
Thank you. This has been going on for a while, and I've always had some interest in this. And I just got back last night. I flew into Portland, and as I got my vehicle and started this way, we're talking about the garbage issue, and it's not only Thurston County, but it's a number of other counties. And the particular county they kind of keyed on was Snohomish County. That issue there is, and I don't know what all the particulars, I think it's a conglomerate of issues, but where and I believe the contractor providing that is Republic. But because, and it appears, what it sounded like was not enough intermodal containers to move the material to keep up with it, along with a lot of other factors. But anyway, they ended up hiring another contractor to assist to get this problem in hand, which is going to cost them $2 million to get caught up. And when I look at our facility here, there's a number of things that I think that we really need to think about, and because our volumes are increasing too, and we've had 2,000 additional tons to date compared to 2021. And I've also checked with a number of other locations, and there's just a lot more waste that's being handled out there. One of the main issues is I don't think that we have enough rail containers to keep up with the daily movement of moving the waste from the transfer stations, to just due to the inconsistency of the train, the switching situation, and other factors. I want just let's see here. Excuse me. And then there's in Centralia, I think, and this is where your waste goes, and I hear now that Port Angeles and Jefferson County is also run through that facility. But if you've ever been down to that facility, it's a pretty busy hub. And there may be adequate containers at that facility, but sometimes you can't get to them. Or there's a consistency where you can't get the containers in. And when that daily flow is interrupted, you start having some real issues. One of the things that I looked at is in Grays Harbor County, the Port of Grays Harbor sends to Centralia a train once or twice a day that's a mile long. And being familiar with the port and with their issues, they may possibly in the near future double that capacity. So it's something that we need to consider in the future. I think that one of the things I've mentioned this all along, the inadequacy or the outdatedness of the Thurston County transfer station to handle the volumes that we're generating today. It just was not designed for that. And the county's moving along with a plan on that, but I think that plan needs to be expedited, because it's not going to be I think it's going to continue to be a bigger problem. And then, and what I'm hearing, that customers, in order to dump, are spending 60 to 90 minutes to get into a facility, causing backups and all kinds of issues. And a statement was made in the paper here a while back that with the new contract and everything, it's going to save the county a lot of money. But if we don't move on what we've got planned, and we expedite things, and I'm assuming the new contract requires the adequate containers to provide the daily service. And when you look at all the expenditures we're going to have, it's something that we need to get our hands on. Thank you.
And I think Steve Gilmore would like to respond. Thanks, Delroy.
Yeah, so the issues that are happening up north have nothing to do with containers. It has everything to do with rail service. The Surface Transportation Board on April 26th and 27th had a hearing in Washington, D.C. regarding Class 1 railroads in the United States. Every Class 1 railroad is having issues. The issues in Skagit, Whatcom, Snohomish, it's actually much more than just Snohomish County, is entirely being impacted by the staffing of the railroads. So the issue with that has really nothing to do with Thurston County whatsoever. Rail service in Centralia has been great. As we move forward with the new contract, we're going to be doubling the size of the Centralia intermodal yard. Much of the material that's actually sitting on that yard will be removed because it's not our equipment. It's actually Waste Connections equipment. And I see no issue in the future moving waste by rail.
Are there any other comments or questions regarding Jeff's manager's report?
I guess, Renee.
Yeah, go ahead, Jim.
Jeff, can you just talk a little bit about how the contract, the new contract thinks about future needs and growth? I think that's the root of this conversation, and I'm guessing we planned for that in the contract.
Yes. So first off, and I think Steve mentioned it a little bit. Is one of the key pieces as far as in this contract will be the capacity and for containers. For example, in the first 2 years of the agreement, they will have at least 2 full days worth of containers physically on site. They will be adding a top pick here, just like they have like the intermodal, which is basically kind of like a crane, so they can stack containers here on site. And then after the second year, they'll have 3 full days of containers, which I'll use for example. Monday, a full day was 30 containers. Well, these are open tops too. You would use a lot less containers if you're compacting, but we'll have between 2 and 3, and eventually up to 3 full days of containers stored on site, which could be, well above 50 containers available. So we have a little less issue with getting the containers here. Again, so do you want to mention that kind of relates to what Delroy was saying as well, that we're having to use so many more containers because of the open tops, where we would require quite as many if we were compacting. So it has created a little more issue because we need so many more to get out of that. Additionally, in the contract, there are stipulations that if substantive conditions change during that period of the agreement, that we can renegotiate after a significant change to our facilities in strange background points here.
Yeah. Is that Jeff Harwood?
There's some background noise, but I muted it.
Okay, thank you. Okay, sorry about that. Yeah, so there is stipulations.
Yeah, it's definitely Jeff Harwood.
Yeah.
Okay, so there's stipulations in the agreement to, if as conditions change or we add facilities, that we can, we can work that out and make changes as needed to adjust to changing conditions. Because there will be, over the course of the 10+ years, eventually, there will be changing conditions. As we continue to expand facilities or add programs or functions. So yeah, definitely, it was looked at, because it's new. Our old contracts were 20+ years old. We wanted to make sure that we put room for growth and change into that.
Thanks for that, Jeff. And it looks like Richard has a question.
One last sort of general question. I was just wondering regarding the flare project. I don't recall what the natural gas consumption was like on the existing flares or the new flare project. Is that going to be substantial at all, or is that a minor contributor to your natural gas use?
So you're talking about the gas that you would use to help ignite the flare?
Yes.
I'd have to look into that a little more to have a good answer for you on that. I would need to confer, and I can get back to you if you'd like.
Sort of the pilot light, if you will.
Correct. It should be very similar. These flares are much smaller. So hopefully actually be a little bit of reduction, but usually, again, it's usually just a small amount to get it going. To get it going. But I think we would use more, again, on this, because of the size of the facility, and we can't run the current flares very often because we don't have enough stored gas to really sustain that for very long. The smaller flares will be able to run at a lower volume and probably run for a little bit longer and to be much more energy efficient, certainly. But if you'd like, I can get back to you with additional information.
Okay. Well, we can talk later, so that's okay.
Okay.
I got just another, Jeff, when I'm thinking back about what is projected for replacement of the compactor, has that been moved up, or is this just going to be a temporary fix and will we have the same problem again?
Actually, so you are correct. We have 920,000 in our capital improvement CIP program for this year to do a potential overhaul of the compactor. However, that being said, we actually have scheduled we got on the books for SSI to come out and do a condition assessment here in the coming month and a half or so, and just take a look to see, what is the overall condition of everything, and would it make sense? Does it make sense to do an overhaul, on it? To how far would that get us down the line with without having any substantive problems, or is it in a condition where it isn't worth it to do that overhaul? Would it make sense just to go new with the new compactor? So we'll wait. We'll wait and see what we hear from that condition assessment.
Because I think another incident like this would probably almost pay for a new compactor, plus all the related impacts to the customers and the different collectors and stuff.
Yeah, the cost for this repair is going to be about $100,000. It's just as a point of reference.
Wow. Thanks for that. And I think Jeff Harwood had a comment about this as well.
I'm having audio. Can you hear me, Renee?
Not real well, but yeah, go ahead.
I just wanted to add that the issues that we're currently experiencing, certainly the compactor being down is a contributing factor, but let's not kid ourselves. It's not going to be a panacea once the compactor is fixed. As Steve alluded to, we need more bandwidth at the intermodal yard, and we need to have regular, increased availability of empty containers. I would point out to everyone that we ran the transfer station, the work, from May of 2015 to December of 2016 with no compactor. And we had very little issues other than if there was a rail disruption, which during that time, I don't recall that there were any problems. So, hopefully we're going to be able to come up with some increased bandwidth, which means more available empty containers, whether they're closed tops or open tops. I mean, closed tops are what we use for the compactor. That's what's going to take to cure this situation and keep the transfer station cleaned out.
Thanks for that, Jeff. Any other questions or comments in relation to Jeff's manager's report? A good discussion, everybody. Anything more from you, Jeff?
I do not. So I think we're ready. Next item.
Do we have any issues for the good of the order? We've got about 10 minutes left.
Renee, may I say something?
Yes, of course.
Hi, everyone. I apologize for being late. Jennifer Walker, the Public Works Director. I just want to recognize and thank both Republic and Waste Connections for recognizing that they are providing essential services to the Thurston County community. And so working together and keeping that at the forefront when we try to problem solve when some of these issues are coming up. And I want to thank both of them and their companies for continuing to keep that at the forefront. Also, Jim, City of Olympia, and their partnership and coordination, I know with the haulers for City of Olympia, it's impacted some of the schedule. And so we're, because the compactor is down and working through that. So I know that Gary and Jeff and Gerald have had conversations as well. So, but just remembering, right, this solid waste management, essential service to our community. Again, thank you for everyone keeping that at the forefront.
Great comments, Jennifer. Thank you for that. I work in a technology dependent industry too, and equipment fails. It just does. And truly appreciate everybody's efforts in seeing us through this time frame and getting back on track with our compactors. So thank you for that. Any other comments before we call this meeting adjourned? I'm looking for hands. And I'm not seeing any. Oh, there's Delroy.
I was just wondering, this meeting was visual and in person. Just wondered if there was any comments. I don't think our in person was that successful.
Yeah, it looks like we had nobody that chose the in-person option. So Amanda's all lonely there all by herself.
I hate to see her sitting there by herself.
So
Lots of
when is
space
our,
to spread out.
what's the date of our June meeting? I should look at my calendar.
June 1st, 10 a.m.
June 1st. I if I can, I'll be there with you, Amanda.
That sounds great, Renee.
I miss you.
Yeah, it'll be nice to see you in person.
Yeah, I would love to see others there too, if they can make it.
Yeah, I was thinking of coming, but today got way too crazy. So including this is a public service announcement that the Seattle Sounders are playing for the hemispheric championship tonight. So
that's kind of a big deal.
It's a big deal. Yeah,
It is. Yeah.
Various people have characterized how big a deal it is, but
yeah,
I'm a season ticket holder, so I'm going to be there.
Nice. You can cheer for all of us.
Yes.
Anything else? I am not seeing any hands raised. So do we have any announcements, Jeff or Amanda? Just that if you can make it on June 1st, we'd love to see you all in person. And with that, I call this meeting adjourned.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank
Have a good day. Bye.
See you in June. Bye.